The Battle of Stalingrad by Chris,
Niam,
Jonas,
Dylan. A fact about the Battle of Stalingrad is the average life expectancy of a Soviet soldier was less than 24 hours, meaning the luckiest of Soviet soldiers got to live more than that.
World War II started September 1st, 1939. The Battle of Stalingrad was the deadliest battle in this war.
The Battle of Stalingrad was fought by Germans, Nazis, and Stalin's Soviets.
The Battle of Stalingrad started on August 23, 1942, and ended on February 2nd, 1943. The length was 5 months, 1 week, and 3 days, and the result was a Soviet victory.
1,129,000 soldiers became casualties. Over 2,700 aircrafts were lost, as well as over 4,000 tanks and almost 16,000 artillery pieces.
This Nazi loss in the Soviet Union started a series of setbacks for Hitler's armies, which they never recovered from. 2 years later, the war ended with a German loss.
Even while the Soviets were beating the Nazis, Hitler didn't surrender.
At the start of World War II, Hitler's military forces appeared unbeatable until Hitler's ego made a costly mistake.
Hitler's insanely good military forces were destroying Moscow. They were on the verge of beating them, but for some reason Hitler split up his troops. Half stayed in Moscow and the other half went into Stalingrad. As you can see here on this image, Moscow is this yellow dot, and Hitler during this battle moved half of his troops into Stalingrad, that red star. This mistake was costly, although Hitler's military was beating Moscow. It wasn't quite over yet. Quickly, half of Hitler's military started struggling against a full Moscow military. Not the only military to get beat. So was the other half of Hitler's military. They went from dominance to nothing just like that.
If it wasn't for Hitler's ego, none of this would have ever happened.
The Battle of Stalingrad is significant for 5 reasons.
First, it was one of Germany's first major losses ever.
Second, it prevented them from having a strong foothold in Soviet territory.
Third, this caused the Eastern Front to take valuable troops and resources from the Western Front. Fourth, this caused both fronts to weaken. Fifth, it would be the beginning of the end of the Nazi dominance in the war, leading to a Nazi surrender 2 years later.
Fifth, after the war, Germany had $23 billion in debt, putting them in poverty for a decent amount of time.
People should know about the Battle of Stalingrad because it was the most important battle in World War II, and things might have been very different if Germany had won.
After Germany collapsed in World War II, the Germans owed over $23 billion in debt to the Allied governments, putting them in poverty for 3 years. As a result, Germany had a shortage of food, housing, energy, and more.
The luckiest of Germans didn't lose a loved one. The people of Germany were dislocated and faced deprivation.
This was also very disappointing to Germany's economy because they, at the time, had not paid the debts fully from World War I.
Debts just kept piling up, only making it worse at the time for Germany. They owed so much debt in World War I that they did not fully finish paying it off until 2010.
In 2010, they finished paying their debts in World War I. They still owe a lot of money for World War II, and they won't be finishing paying off their debts anytime soon. They owed so much debt from both these wars that in total there's an estimated total of $300 billion in debt, according to the London Agreement on German External.
In conclusion, there were many different costly mistakes that ruined Hitler's reign of power. Some of these mistakes being that he underestimated the weather and having many people freeze to death. They also overestimated their own troops and ended up losing the battle because of this.
During our history fair, we used 8 sources, 3 primary sources, and 5 secondary sources. On the next slide, you'll see all the sources linked. On the top of this page are our primary sources. Some of them were interviews, articles, and documentaries. On the bottom of our page, there are secondary sources, which are the same as the primary sources with interviews, articles, and documentaries. We hope you enjoyed this project.